Is that up to your high standards?
Is that going to be a thing every episode?
Yeah. Were you familiar with Bong? I can't remember his name actually. The rich family also is like a parasite takes off the poor.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Lights Camera Podcast, everybody's favourite movie podcast. And in the last episode we watched and reviewed Blue Story, and this episode we will be watching and we'll be reviewing Bong Joon-ho's newest film, Parasite. But before we get to that, I think last we heard about yourself, you were on a very boring, mind-numbing ICU placement. So let's hear some advancements. Hopefully, fingers crossed, things have improved for you. But do let us know.
Well, they've kind of improved and also not improved, in the sense that So the ITU placement, I think, ultimately was kind of looking back on it now. It seemed all right, but that's more because what I'm on now, anesthetics, it's kind of good and bad. I find it can be quite fun at times when you're more involved, so in the induction process, so putting in the cannulas, getting the patient ready, holding open the airway, assisting in the intubation. But then once they're asleep, it's pretty boring because you're just kind of hanging around. And a lot of time with surgery there's a lot of waiting around because surgical lists are unpredictable. People might need emergency surgery, sometimes people have issues, high blood sugar, what have you, and so it's kind of, I don't know, swings and roundabouts, I suppose. Sometimes, like, positives and negatives now of ITU looking back, but also positives and negatives of anesthetics. But holiday soon. I'm looking forward to that.
Absolutely, yeah. One day to go.
One day, exactly. And how has your, GP journey continued to be going? Has it continued to be as splendid and fascinating as you mentioned last time?
I think it's about where it was before. I don't know if I described it as that last time.
No.
I don't know if I just had a really good day that day. But it's been a good learning experience, seeing things that come into primary care.
Yeah.
And what the community generally tends to present with, as GP's been the first port of call, as well as A&E. But it has been interesting in that regard. But again, it's not something I think I would want to do in the same way with you with anesthetics and CCU. It's interesting to do for a while, but I can't see myself doing it for a prolonged period of time. But yeah. Yeah,
and what also, have you got any kind of plans over Christmas or anything like that?
Not really. I mean, I've still got my SJT exam to do.
Okay.
Obviously, you've done yours, but I've still got mine now in January, the start of January. So probably will be doing a bit of preparation for that. But as you have experienced, and a lot of people, it's difficult. It's a difficult exam to prepare for, and you can make the mistake of over preparing or doing the wrong preparation and then just getting yourself confused. So I'm going to try and avoid doing that as much as I can. But I'm generally someone who likes to prepare for things. I do fall into the trap of just over preparing. So it's going to be difficult to try and not do that as much.
Yeah, I think definitely try hold back a bit.
Yeah.
I definitely found that I did hardly any work in the last week because I was so busy with ITU, and I don't think it had any negative impact, to be honest. Although obviously I was more fortunate in the sense that we had done a lot of sessions because all of our group except you had it at the same kind of time, and now no one's really doing anything. Although, actually no, we can't even do it over the holidays because we've got it straight away when we come back, don't we?
What's that?
You've got it on the day we come back.
Yeah, it's on the 3rd or 4th of January.
We can't even do more sessions just for the sake of
No. And I wouldn't want, because I think what the sessions that we've done have been as productive as those sessions could be.
Exactly.
There's nothing more I could
do.
gain from the sessions, really, because we'd just be going over things we've already gone over.
Exactly.
And I mean, this is going to be our last holiday before things really kick into gear.
Yeah.
And we've got exams in April, so we've only got 4 months or so after this to prepare for those. So this holiday is going to be full on chill.
Yeah.
Mainly, anyway.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the right way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Cool.
But the topic of today's podcast, take us away.
Okay, yes. So, The movie that we did this week, as Zayn has mentioned already, is called Parasite. And in terms of the story, so Parasite follows the story of a poor Korean family trying to become rich through scheming to become employees of a much wealthier family. Ultimately, however, they do so at a great cost, both to their morals and also their lives. The movie opens with us seeing the poor family, who consist of Kim, the dad, Chung, the mum, Kevin, the son, and Ki, the daughter. And we see that they're working quite low-paid jobs and struggling to put food on the table. When Kevin, the son, gets a chance to tutor for a rich family, the Parks, he plots with his family to get them all employed in the rich house. And ultimately that ends up happening. Kevin as an English tutor, Ki as an art tutor, Kim, the dad, as the driver, and finally Chung as the maid, who replaces their long-term maid, who's called Moon. The Parks, so the rich family, go away on holiday for the weekend, and the poor family end up enjoying the luxuries, of the rich house. And during this time, Moon, the old maid, arrives back, and we discover that her husband has been living in the basement this whole time, as they're also poor and in debt. A fight breaks out, and then we find out that the Parks, the rich family, are returning from their holiday, and what ultimately ends up happening, again, spoilers, Moon the maid gets killed, and her husband is locked in the basement. The poor family escape, but find out that the house is destroyed, and finally, the movie ends sort of with the Parks throwing a party for their son, where Kevin gets basically almost fatally injured, but ultimately he does survive. Ki, the sister, killed by the maid's husband. And the biggest kind of shock of them all, Kim, who is the poor dad, kills the rich dad, Mr. Park. So, yeah, that's kind of a summary of the synopsis of the movie. Is that up to your high standards?
Is that going to be a thing every episode?
Yeah.
Yes, I was. That was an excellent summary of the plot of the movie.
Okay,
well
good,
done.
good.
You
I'll
get
give
a gold
myself
star.
a pat on the back.
Yeah.
So yeah, I suppose, what were your thoughts kind of going into the movie, and were you familiar with Bong? I can't remember his name actually.
Bong Joon-ho. I had to write it
Bong
down myself.
Joon-ho.
Yeah.
Were you familiar with him before?
No, and I looked him up after I watched this movie, and I have recognized. I haven't watched any of his movies, but I recognize a few of them. So he's done a lot of American ones actually. So Snowpiercer, he written and directed. Okja, which is a Netflix original movie, he's written and directed. So he is a fairly well-known director. And yeah, so this movie has 100% made me want to go and watch his other movies. But back to your original question about what were my thoughts going in. I was expecting a movie similar to something like Get Out. The trailer it gave me that impression, where there's someone going into another person's home, another family's home, that seems great on the outside, but there's something more sinister going on really on the inside. I would say it was in a way similar to Get Out, but not in that way. I think it was similar to Get Out in its visuals. There was a lot of creativity in the visuals, a lot of very rich shots. It was similar in that there was quite a lot of symbolism as well, and kind of an underlying message to the actual main plot of the movie. Thus, I said those are the similarities that were present more so than what I was expecting. What about you?
Again, yeah. So I'm suppose similar to you. I was aware of Mr. Bong before this, because I've watched Snowpiercer.
Oh, okay.
And I quite enjoyed that movie. He tends to kind of make movies about very topical things, rather than just kind of for the sake of it. And it's you can tell that from the movie. You can tell from his movies, although I have only watched Snowpiercer, that he's trying to get kind of a message across. And again, similar to you, I felt that, yeah, it would be a movie whereby, you find out some really dark secret in the family. And, what the movie did really, really well is that acts as a big point of tension and build up and the horror component, because that's ultimately the horror component, is that you expecting some very scary, sinister thing to happen with regards to the rich family. But actually, I don't think, and I think this is also the purpose of the message, I don't think there's anything sinister about the family.
Not at
And
all.
I think that's part of his message, that
Yeah.
it looks sinister, and a lot of things, and contrasting the poor family stereotypically, you think poor family good and whatever, rich family bad, they have got like some terrible secret. But I think ultimately the big thing of this movie is showing no one is really bad, but you have that expectation, and I think that drives forward the movie.
Yeah, I think you have that expectation because they're set up to be so naive and so overly nice and trusting that there must be some kind of secret agenda going on as to why they're hiring all these people and why they want them in their house. It just turns out they are really naive and really nice people, or maybe not even really nice, but definitely naive in a lot of ways, and that sets up this expectation for a twist, and there is a twist in the movie. It's just not what you expect to happen, and that once that twist hits, the tension never goes. The movie is tense throughout right until the end from that point, and that's one thing I absolutely love this film just in general. I really, really, really liked it, and I thought everything that happened is either nothing went to waste. Either something was being set up or there was the payoff, and it was an entertaining movie from beginning to end in that way.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
Yeah.
And I'd also echo, this is again kind of moving on to another point, that I thought that use of lighting and set in this movie was fantastic. I thought it was really, really well done, especially right from the start. The house of this Korean family, it paints a picture, you totally can see, of what you can imagine as a busy people living in the center of a city in a kind of this kind of poor atmosphere. The shots are very busy in the poorhouse. There's lots of stuff. The lighting is really good. You really get the impression of very cramped. The shots again a lot of the shots contain all the family in the pictures in the image, and I thought that was really, really good. Whereas that contrasts heavily with the family. In the rich family, where it's very large, very empty, very spacious, and there's often not very many people in the shots in that house. It's often only one or two people, and there's a lot of shots of just one person. So I thought that was really, really well done, and the use of lighting, I thought it was really fantastic.
No, I hadn't actually noticed that you're right that a lot of the shots in the poor family's home is with loads of people in it, whereas definitely the shots in the rich family is more spacious, but I didn't pick up particularly that there were less people in each shot. But even still, the shots that were in the rich family's home were still very vibrant and interesting to look at.
Exactly, yeah. And eerie. It's kind of eerily quiet and eerily empty.
Absolutely. And I think everyone did an amazing job with the performances as well. Particularly for me, I thought that the poor family's father, he did an amazing job. He was such a believable character as this kind of broken down man who's just, he's, well, kind of in that way, but also that he's like kind of jovial and doesn't take things too seriously. And his mentality really comes across the way he thinks. So at one point in the movie, when his son asks him, after what you mentioned about they kill the old maid and her husband is locked in the basement, that what we're going to do, what's the plan? And he just says, well, the best plan is to have no plan because that can never fail. And that just shows his mindset of like just a very defeated man, I think. And I don't know if that's why he's in the position he is, because he has this mentality of never planning for things, or is it that he's been put down for so long that he's just given up?
Yeah.
And I think that one scene of dialogue really added a lot to his character.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I feel also and I think actually he was, and it's not actually a concept that is easy to take in, and that's why I think he did it very well, this idea that actually also the poor family had actually some issues themselves, which had some characters who were quite bad, in the sense that, when the poor dad is like downstairs, Kim, with the maid's husband, he sees how grateful that guy is, the basement guy. He's just like, oh, I'm so grateful that I've got this food, that Mr. Park, the rich dad, gives me this food, that I've got this shelter. And the poor dad just looks so shocked. He's so surprised. And he actually asks him about it, like, why why are you like this? Why, you've lived down here for so long. And I think he again realizes about how kind of grateful this guy is. Whereas for them, they had become so obsessed with, living this rich life in this house, and that had become so important to them. But ultimately, they ended up actually losing what did matter to them, which was their home.
Yeah.
So I think part of the movie was kind of breaking down some of the stereotypes of, like, the rich family just being bad, the poor family being good, but rather you just have a bunch of people who are kind of very molded by their circumstances.
Yeah, definitely. And that is so true as to when they actually get the house for a day. Their mentality is to just sleep and drink expensive alcohol, which is basically what they were doing even in their poor home.
Yeah.
It doesn't really change them, especially at least for the parents. They're still stuck in that mindset of this is how to live your life. And the Moon, the housekeeper, even comments on it. She's like, this is all you can think to do. Like, when we were here, we would, admire the architecture and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
They wouldn't even think twice about that kind of thing.
Exactly, yeah. And I felt like, what did you think? So this is actually quite a big thing of the movie, was the smell of the poor dad, so
Yeah.
Kim, and it crops up a few times where a number of characters, usually the rich dad, and mention, and it's also right at the end as well, when the basement guy gets killed, is the smell of Mr. Kim, and also of the basement guy when he gets killed. And that actually then obviously enrages Mr. Kim, who then kills Mr. Park. So what was your view on that? What do you think that symbolized?
I think it's, as you said, no one is good and no one is bad. So I think that's the bad side of the wealthy family, that they do look down upon the poorer family, and they say, oh, they have this smell. And I think that he gets really heavily offended by that, him personally, more so than the other members of the poor family. And right at the end, when Moon's husband is basically, he's dying on the floor, and he says to him, respect or something, or respect Mr. Park, and he's dying. There's no reason for this, but all Mr. Park does is notice that he smells bad, and I think that for him is like the final straw that causes him to kill Mr. Park. That this man is showing such gratitude, yet he doesn't care for him. So I think that is representative of like how he sees that rich people will never care for, or people with wealth will never at all actually care for people who don't have wealth, and they'll always be seen as below them.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I feel like it's this idea that no matter how much he may try, that thing lingers with him. Kind of like this idea that, no matter how hard he tries, the fact that he's from a poor background is almost stuck with him in the eyes of the world or whatever. It doesn't matter. He could be like trying to be like this professional driver and live this lifestyle, but that is still a part of who he is. And it's quite like a strange thing to say, because it's not really regarded as like a good thing, but it's not meant in, I don't mean it in a bad way, but it's more like how solidly class is seen in society. Because you do see it in real life anyway. You see, we're in medical school, especially where, a lot of, and we were talking about it earlier about imposter syndrome and something. And I know I sometimes feel that way, like just so shocked that, oh man, we're actually final year medical students.
How did I get
How
here?
did I get here? And I think it's actually a kind of similar thing. But that is also what you mentioned about how at the end, when the maid's husband is dying and he's saying, oh, respect Mr. Park, how poignant that is, that it's almost, and I think that's partly about how the rich family also is like a parasite takes off the poor, in that they're like using these poor people to kind of help them and live their lives. And it's not actually just one way. It's not just that the poor family are like benefiting, taking the money. It's also of their labor, they're using them, and also the superiority as well.
Yeah, that's so true. Because I'd with the movie being named Parasite, I saw how it applies from the poor family to the rich, in that they're feeding off of their wealth, and that they're benefiting and cheating them from it in a way. But it goes. You're right, completely right. It goes the exact same way. Where if those people weren't there to benefit from, their class is essentially gone. Their whole wealth and class is based on the fact that they're superior to these other people in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
This is what their monetary wealth gets them. I completely agree with that. I think there's other kind of symbolism in the movie. So there's the smell, as you mentioned. There's also the rock that they get given at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, what did you think? Oh, I'm going to ask you first. What did you think of the rock?
I don't think I have anything too deep or meaningful. I think it can kind of symbolize literally like a rock holding you down and keeping you where you are, similar to the smell, that you're always going to be stuck in that position and this will always linger with you. But this is like a physical thing that's dragging you down and stopping you from being able to ascend to anything better. Because you see by the end of the movie, and it's funny because it's supposed to represent like good fortune, I think, in the movie, and it kind of brings them a false good fortune where they think that they're benefiting now and they're prospering, but in the end it bites them in the back. But by the end of the movie, the son from the poor family, he throws the rock away, he gets rid of it, and from there is when he kind of changes his attitude and makes the decision that he's going to actually try to work hard, go to university, study, and earn enough money to buy that house that the rich family owned. And I think that leaving the rock behind is like leaving the mentality of a person who's in poverty, and to try to lead a better life, basically. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree, and I would actually add to that I feel, in a way, it was like linked to this whole thing about his dad not having a plan. And for me, the rock felt like not having a proper plan. Instead, he'd carry the rock around with him when those people were outside peeing or whatever. He takes the rock with him. He goes outside. When he goes down to the basement, he takes the rock with him. And he keeps saying the rock is like a metaphor. He keeps saying it. And it's kind of like this blind faith. And I think it's a criticism of that, like this kind of blind faith in this object that brings him fortune. Whereas, and it's kind of this idea of his dad also telling him not to have a plan. Whereas, and even he tells him at the end, when their house has been flooded and they're kind of together. But Kevin, the son, actually tells the dad, no, I've got a plan. I'm actually going to go through with it. And to me, again, it felt like when he gets rid of that rock after it's actually used to hit him on the head and just make him disabled, it's a shift in his attitude towards life. And it's almost taking responsibility onto himself rather than putting this faith in this other object and not having a plan, and just a shift in mentality, really.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of this movie in its message is about mentality and how different mentalities people of different monetary wealths have, and how it's either does that mentality come from having wealth, or is it what produces the wealth? And obviously by the end of the movie we see that as we both just mentioned, he has this change in mentality. But I don't know how, because we see him go to the house and he's got the wealth, but I think that's just in his head, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's just he's foreseeing that happening.
Yeah.
This was a really good movie, and I think it's one where, I mean, there's so many I'm sure there's so many things that I missed on the first viewing, just the small little pockets of dialogue that you have to be on your toes watching it. You can't really get distracted just because you're going to miss something.
Exactly.
And that was really, really good, because that just makes it so much better to rewatch, because you'll be like, oh, I didn't catch that the first time. That's interesting, and you can leave with a different kind of viewpoint each time.
Yeah, totally. And I think another thing that they did really, really well was the dialogue between the family, between the poor family. There were really long scenes, actually, especially when they're all drinking together. That was a long scene, and a lot of it is just kind of panning between the characters like that as they talk. And it was so engaging. It's so engaging because you're seeing like this intimate view of this family, and actually sometimes a side of the family which isn't too good, because they're all like, they almost seem like they've gone crazy. They're like very different to, they're around the table with all this alcohol compared to what you see at the beginning, where they're a bit more measured, and they're all I can't remember what they're talking about, but it's something a bit better. And the dad is like pretends to like strangle the wife or whatever, and it's a bit just like, oh God, what's kind of happened here?
They've gone completely unhinged, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, and but I think that through the dialogue, it was really good. And another thing which I remember is how the daughter, Key, she says, "Oh, why are you worrying about everyone else so much?
Yeah.
It's about me, just like it should be about us."
Yeah.
And it's that very selfish kind of mentality, which is kind of developed. And they do seem a bit selfish, especially the daughter. Like they definitely come across as a bit selfish, and perhaps that is, a result of their lack of wealth and or lack of material goods. They've maybe they haven't taken the same message as the guy in the basement who's just very grateful of everything, but instead they've kind of got this idea where they need to exploit other people, and other poor people, whatever, so they can get what they want.
Yeah, and I mean, it's that same greed is what gets them caught in the end, because they could have just had the son be the tutor, and they could have earned money that way, and a decent amount as well. He was getting paid very well, but then he had to bring the daughter in, and they didn't stop there. They had to bring the father in as the driver, and then they had to bring the mother in as the housekeeper. And I don't know if they ever show any regret also to the people who have ended up losing their jobs because of them. I think the father does slightly when he says, "Oh, I wonder how the driver's doing now." But even that's when the daughter says, "No, it's about us."
Yeah.
And it's just that mentality of just survival, I guess.
Yeah.
It's us or them, basically.
Yeah. And one last thing I would actually mention is this idea that both those families, the poor family and the Moon, the old housemaid, and her husband, both of them are poor. Both of them are from poor backgrounds. But rather than, when they're in the basement, they see each other, rather than kind of working together or, having some kind of mercifulness, the mum, the poor mum, Chung, she actually still is about to phone the police. And I was just like, what are you doing? You're poor as well. You've come here. Surely there's kind of, because the Moon had said, "Oh no, I'll leave. Just give all I ask for. We'll give you this money. Just give food to my husband." And she still wasn't going to do that. And this idea that because of this kind of this environment fosters a very toxic, fosters almost toxic personalities. These very selfish, individualistic, exploitative characters, and ultimately through that, everyone ends up losing.
Yeah.
The husband dies, the Moon dies, the daughter gets killed, because of that. So it's almost a desperation what it drives people to.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, man. What would you say? Anything else you have to add?
No. I was going to ask you. Yeah, what would you rate this movie out of 10?
Out of 10, I would rate this movie an 8.5. I think the only reason I'm not going higher is because I've only seen it once, and I don't think I'd ever rate anything higher than that. I wouldn't rate anything higher than a 9, or a 9 or above, based on a first viewing, because I think a second viewing is really important, especially for a movie like this. But yeah, 8.5 is a very good score for me.
Yeah, no, I think that's quite respectful, and I understand also, where you've come from there. I would give it, I would say 8 to 8.5.
Okay.
Yeah.
So was there anything you didn't like about this movie? There were a few things I didn't like.
Yeah.
What about you?
It wasn't anything big. I'm not too sure, to be honest. It's a thing where I need to rewatch it.
Yeah.
I think there were certain bits which I didn't feel were like. I think there's a scene where they're kind of on the couch they're on the couch, Mr. and Mrs. Park, and they start like doing like some sexual stuff. I didn't really see the point of that.
Yeah.
Again, our criticism. We may come across as very bitter individuals, but no. And I don't know. I feel like I don't know. I just feel like perhaps there could have been a bit extra oomph somewhere. Just like, a really climactic moment more than because it's quite short, and I
Yeah.
feel maybe that climax they could have made it a bit different.
Okay.
Not made it a bit different, but added something to that.
Yeah.
But I think I need to rewatch it to kind of
No,
think
that's
that through a
fair
bit
enough, yeah.
better. What about you?
For me, I think it was just that I thought the Park family were a bit too naive. I thought there's a few moments where, not just naive, but there were a few. They were quite naive, but there were a few moments where the things happened. People got away with things by chance. So, for example, when the poor son is hiding under the bed of the rich daughter, and she's about to look underneath, but just her mum calls her at the right time, and he gets away. And just moments like that where I'm like, that shouldn't have happened in that way. But it's just very small moments, and it doesn't ruin it. It doesn't take you out of the film. So I don't see it as too big of an issue.
It's not too overused either.
Yeah.
Those techniques. But yeah.
Well, that ends our discussion for Parasite. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. And if there's any films you'd like us to review and analyse, please do let us know in the comments. And if you like this video, give it a like. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next one.
See you. Bye.